After the trades of Davante Adams and Amari Cooper, it's clear that Commanders GM Adam Peters got great value in his trade of Jahan Dotson during the preseason and 4 players that Washington could target before the NFL trade deadline. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. You also find me writing for WUSA9.com this season, and I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. I appreciate you coming through today. Everydayers, I appreciate you coming through every single day. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, in which we're going to take our first look at the Carolina Panthers. It is Wednesday. It is officially time to start looking forward. But before we do that, we have to take some final lessons from what happened against the Baltimore Ravens in Week 6, including taking a look at that middle of the defense that looked to be exceptionally soft last weekend against the Ravens. But we're going to kick this episode off talking about the heated up NFL trade market, what it means for the Washington Commanders. If you want to get even more out of the show, all you got to do is sign up to be a Locked On Commanders insider today by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. And from there, you'll get text messages from me. You can send text messages to me. You'll also get bonus content information and access to our insider-only exclusive Zoom conferences. It's a lot of fun. So if you want to check it out, get involved in that. It's joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Try it out for free for the first 2 weeks. If you like it, stick around. If you're already an insider who's not coming through for the Zooms, by all means, come through. Don't be shy. We would love to hear from you. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Davante Adams is headed to the New York Jets. Well, he's already with the New York Jets. If you haven't already caught, literally made his first appearance with Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show just shortly after the news broke. The Jets are sending a conditional third-round pick that could become a second-round pick to the Las Vegas Raiders. The conditions on that are individually based. So Davante Adams basically has to hit certain benchmarks while he's with the New York Jets this season for that pick to elevate to a second-round pick. If he doesn't, then it'll stay a third-round pick. Meanwhile, wide receiver Amari Cooper is headed to the Buffalo Bills for a 2025 third-round pick and a 2026 seventh-round pick. Buffalo is also getting a 2025 sixth-round pick from the Cleveland Browns in that deal. So the AFC East stocking up on weapons. The Jets go out and get Davante Adams. The Bills counter with Amari Cooper. We'll see which move pans out the best overall, but that's not what we're here to talk about, right? This isn't Locked On Jets, Locked On Bills, Locked On Browns, or Locked On Raiders. Check out all of those shows if you want to get the full juice on what these trades mean for each of those teams. But we want to know what it means for the Washington Commanders. And right on the surface, what a wide receiver trade, heated up market, warmed up market really means for the Washington Commanders is it's a chance to evaluate the trade that they made of a wide receiver. And that, of course, being first-round draft pick Jahan Dotson, who was traded during the preseason to the Philadelphia Eagles. And now that you have some like comparisons, you've got other receivers being traded. And the good thing about this is it's just the receiver being traded. It's not Amari Cooper and a defensive lineman and a practice squad player getting traded for this guy, right? And that you see that in like baseball a lot, in basketball, where it's like, here's the main piece, but then there's all these other little pieces. No, you've got draft capital, which has pretty clear, value definitions, and then one player, so you can kind of evaluate the value that the teams trading those players got for said players. And when you look at the Dotson trade that Adam Peters executed in the preseason, Dotson and a 2025 fifth round pick, right? So remember, the Commanders threw in their fifth round pick next year to Philadelphia for a 2025 third and 2 seventh round picks in return. We don't know which third, but if we assume it's the later of the two, then the Eagles sent roughly 51 points to the Washington Commanders worth of draft capital that's using the Rich Hill trade model to Washington. So the Commanders 2025 fifth round pick is worth 10 points, meaning that Dotson then accounts for 41 points of that trade. So when you talk about equal transitions, basically Jahan Dotson gets a 41-point trade evaluation, equaling a late third round pick, or the 94th overall pick to be exact. So basically if you want to look at it that way, you send the 94th pick in the third round, a late third, a late fifth over to the Philadelphia Eagles for a mid-round third and 2 mid-round sevenths right now. So that's basically how this pans out for the Jahan Dotson value. Now, Davante Adams as a straight up third is currently worth 56 points. That's the 80th pick overall. Could elevate to as high as the 48th pick, and these are all projected off of current standings. So those will fluctuate as well. That's 121 points. So there's a pretty wide window for how valuable that Davante Adams valuation really is. And basically what it means is the Raiders value Davante up to that 121 point mark, but are willing to take that 56 point mark, which is a wide berth. Amari Cooper in that trade from the Cleveland Browns to the Buffalo Bills came out to a 41 point value, and that's equal to the exact same value that Jahan Dotson came out to. So it basically means that in his trade of a wide receiver, Adam Peters got Amari Cooper valuation out of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the difference between Amari Cooper and Jahan Dotson, obviously, Amari Cooper is much more established in the league. A lot of people still look at him and say, well, he's more a victim of his circumstances and the quarterback play and all that stuff. Whereas with Jahan Dotson, again, that rookie season came out pretty strong, suffered the hamstring injury, took some time to get back from that, finished his rookie season pretty strong, I thought. Then his second season with Sam Howell, the quarterback, Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator, things didn't work out really just across the board. Didn't really work out. And then coming into this season, a lot of people, we were excited about Jahan Dotson and the potential in a Cliff Kingsbury offense, much more designed to get playmakers in space, much more designed to utilize speed and downfield threats. And we really thought Jahan Dotson would be able to return to form and have a big impact in this offense. Ultimately, through practices and all that stuff, it just kind of became apparent that Jahan and this roster, or not this roster, but this scheme and this coach staff just wasn't a fit. And so they decided to move on for him. In Philly, he's not doing great, to be quite honest with you, but there's still time there for him to try to make an impact there. Now, getting that exact valuation that the Cleveland Browns get for Amari Cooper here, I mean, that makes that trade look a little bit better. I know a lot of people were not exactly happy with the valuation and the return that the Commanders got for Jahan Dotson. But I think when you compare that to a player the caliber of Amari Cooper, that makes it look a little bit better. Now, the difference between Davante Adams and Jahan Dotson currently is 15 points, right? So we'll have to see, how Davante Adams' season goes and if that pick elevates. Because again, if Adams hits certain milestones, that valuation goes way up. Now, when you look at that comparison, and by the way, Dotson 9 catches for 35 yards in Philly, despite the fact that AJ Brown and Devonta Smith have both missed multiple weeks, it's looking better, like I said, than what some people initially thought. Granted, the Eagles had to pay more to make that an interdivisional trade and to make it in preseason, right? So you're getting Jahan Dotson earlier in the process. Granted, a trade for Davante Adams, a trade for Amari Cooper in the preseason at the same time as Jahan Dotson probably would have netted each team more capital in return. Like maybe, the Jets would have sent a firm second round pick for Davante Adams in the preseason, and the Cleveland Browns, maybe wouldn't have had to give up, say that 6th round pick, whatever it is that they gave up in exchange for Amari Cooper. So it's not an apples to apples return evaluation, but it is the closest thing we get to an evaluation to really kind of gauge in comparison to the rest of the NFL market, how valuable was that Jahan Dotson trade. And even if you take the preseason bump in draft capital, still looks like Adam Peters got pretty good return out of trading a wide receiver that pretty much everybody in the NFL at that time knew they weren't going to be using. So what about the trade market continuing to be warm? Again, the trade deadline is not until November 5th, so there's still some time, but there are 4 players right now on the surface that we can look at that we think the Washington Commanders might have their eye on or could have their eye on moving forward. That's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And that's coming up thanks to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a sponsor for today's episode. And when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find qualified professionals that are right for the role that you're looking to fill. And that's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. But LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire a professional, like professional, and LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. So join 2.5 small businesses that have already used LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. And with Prize Picks, you can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You have to pick 2 to 6 player projections, but with as little as 4, again, you can win up to 100 times your money. Prize Picks is the best way to get into action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. So sign up today and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to get that $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So you go through the stat projections and you think this wide receiver is going to get more than his stat projections on Prize Picks. You add him to your roster. You add at least one more player, again, up to 5 more players, and you watch that money roll in. Get with your friends, win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Continuing now in today's episode of Locked On Commanders, we're talking about the NFL trade market heating up. I mean, it was not the trade deadline, but certainly things got warm on October 15th, especially in the wide receiver market. There was also a running back trade. Cam Akers was moved as well. And there may have been some other smaller ones that I missed in the process as well. Covering a lot of things on Tuesday. One of the busiest, quote unquote, off days of a week that I've had in quite some time. So again, the NFL trade deadline is November 5th. So we're still several weeks away from NFL teams having to solidify any and all trade deals that they want to make. But that also means we have a few weeks coming up that are going to help some teams maybe become sellers who may not be full sellers right now. They may start to look to sell off some pieces. Obviously, teams like the Cleveland Browns kind of already, I mean, you don't trade your number one wide receiver and not put yourself firmly in the sellers market. So there are some other players on that Cleveland Browns roster, I think, that people are looking at now that, they might have some interest in and interest in seeing if the Cleveland Browns are willing to move on from. In that vein, actually, Insider Merle came through and identified 2 players that he would like to see the Washington Commanders target. So I thought we'd dive into those real quick here. Tennessee Titans defensive end Harold Landry, or outside linebacker Harold Landry, and Patriots defensive back Jonathan Jones are 2 players that Merle said he'd like to see the Commanders target. Starting with Landry in this conversation, Harold Landry, 28 years old currently, 2018 second round pick. If I remember correctly, coming out of Boston College. This is his 6th season playing. He did miss the 2022 NFL season with a torn ACL. Played in 17 games in 2023, his first year back from the ACL, and so far has played in all 5 of his team's games this season. So that second season is typically where people say, ACL injury sufferers say that they really start to feel like themselves again. Has 45.5 career sacks to his name, 4 sacks so far this season. The Tennessee Titans are 1-4 right now. They are in an AFC South division where the Indianapolis Colts are not great. The Jacksonville Jaguars are not great. The Houston Texans are obviously the best team in that division, but the Titans might feel like they can steal enough, divisional matchups and all that stuff that they might be able to make some noise in the AFC, perhaps compete for one of those last wild card spots. But they do visit the Buffalo Bills this weekend, who are looking to have Amari Cooper active for his first game with them. Then they also visit the Detroit Lions in week 8. So 1-6, certainly possible for the Titans, predictable for the Tennessee Titans. They host the Patriots in week 9, which could be a winnable matchup. But if they lose that and fall to 1-7, then a sale could be on. The Tennessee Titans could look to start moving some players and some pieces. And with Harold Landry, he's certainly one of their most valuable players, certainly a player that they're going to get the most return for. But again, what teams have to balance, and we just kind of talked about this a little bit, is the longer you hold on to a player, the less you're going to get back for him, right? You hold Harold Landry for 3 more weeks, you're not going to get as much in draft capital return as you would have if you had traded him 3 weeks prior, right? So that's kind of one of those situations. His current contract, Harold Landry's current contract, runs through 2026, so still 2 existing years left on it. He's due $24.05 million against the salary cap in each of those 2 years. So Adam Peters would likely want to rework that deal. Maybe you tack on an extra year of guaranteed money and reduce the amount of money per year on those current deals and all that stuff. You can kind of spread that out a little bit. There's a lot of contract jujitsu that smart front offices like the one that Adam Peters is running can do with players. And what might look like a lesser deal for a player like Harold Landry actually gives him more guaranteed money, and that's what makes him happier is that guarantee and that security moving forward. For the crowd of don't trade draft capital, send players. A guy like Jamin Davis, stuff like that. Like if you're the Tennessee Titans and you're going to trade an outside linebacker like Harold Landry, who's got a couple years left on his contract after this season and has done pretty well, you're not looking to bring on a guy whose contract is going to expire this year, and you're not going to get anything back for him. Like, Jamin Davis isn't going to go out there and sign some big fat contract and get the Titans a compensatory third round pick or anything like that. So that's not really something, that's probably going to be in the cards. Usually when a team is selling, they're looking to stock up on draft capital. We know that Adam Peters doesn't want to trade a lot of draft capital. So again, those deals have to be just kind of in that right spot. But we do know that he's open, obviously, to talking to people as he has done already this offseason. So Harold Landry, certainly an intriguing player, still young enough to be a long-term part of this team's plan. Again, it would just depend on the compensation. The other player, cornerback Jonathan Jones, he's a little bit older, turned 31 this last September, undrafted out of Auburn originally. He's been with the Patriots since 2016, has started 63 games in 9 years, and has 11 career interceptions. He started all 6 games this year for the Patriots and has allowed a 135.6 passer rating when targeted. His current contract expires at the end of the year. So this is more of a question of, all right, like we're probably sending a 7th to the Patriots for him. He's a starting cornerback, but he's not a very good starting cornerback. He's a little bit on the smaller end as well. I don't know that I think there's a fit here for the Commanders and their defense specifically. But you like the experience and all those things, and special teams contribution ability potentially as well. But outside of this team suffering an injury, I don't know that I see a fit for Jonathan Jones. A little short, like I said, but there is a guy who's a little bit taller, and he's on a team that is currently or just currently sold a major piece. So they obviously again kind of get put into that seller's market. Cornerback Greg Newsome II. As you can imagine, not having the greatest year for the Cleveland Browns, but that only makes him cheaper in theory, right? You look at him and you tell the Browns, look, he's not doing all that well. We're going to take him off your hands. He's got a contract that runs through next season on his 5th-year option. So you tell the Cleveland Browns you don't have to pay that fully guaranteed 5th-year option. We'll pay that. You get the former first-round pick out of Northwestern in 2021, and you can come in here and see if he's a fit. And his current hit isn't so big that if you bring it on and don't extend him or rework his deal, in the next offseason, that you're hindering your own cap management potentials. In fact, if anything, you're marking some money for 2026. If he doesn't work out, you're freeing up about $12-13 million in the 2026 offseason that you can then use elsewhere. My dream candidate, I'm going to stick in the cornerback wheelhouse though, is Jaycee Horn of the Carolina Panthers. Well, my dream candidate is Patrick Surtain from the Denver Broncos, but that's not happening. So my dream candidate who could actually be available is Jaycee Horn of the Carolina Panthers, another 2021 first-round pick, like Greg Newsome. Horn is 6'1", a little bit taller, a little bit longer. The son of former NFL receiver Joe Horn. He's got 5 career interceptions and 28 starts. That's not very many, but he has had a few injury issues. Had an injury to his right foot in 2021. Had a chest rib sprain in 2022. I didn't even know you could sprain your rib. He had an ankle sprain in 2023, a hamstring strain in 2023 that caused him to miss 10 games. He has played in all 6 games this season so far, and he's still playing on his current rookie deal. He is owed $12.5 million next year on his 5th-year option that Carolina picked up this last offseason, which is still less money than Greg Newsome's. I think JC's got the higher upside, right? Like when he is on the field, he is the better cornerback than Greg Newsome. Greg Newsome's availability obviously has been much more available, just to kind of tongue in cheek it. Look, the Carolina Panthers are actually a team where, depending on their valuation of Emmanuel Forbes, they actually may be willing to do a player swap here. They may actually be willing to do Jaycee Horn and, I don't know, maybe a 5th-round pick for Emmanuel Forbes and a 7th-round pick or something. And I'm just spitballing here with the Washington Commanders draft capital. And that's something that, you're taking a risk on the health and all that stuff. But they took a risk on the health of Noah Brown. Granted, there's no draft capital swapping in that. It's just money. But I think Jaycee Horn is intriguing. If the Carolina Panthers are willing to talk turkey, maybe you are able to send them Emmanuel Forbes, who has multiple years left on his rookie deal, which is intriguing to a team like the Carolina Panthers, especially if they think they're smarter than you and can fix him where you couldn't. And then you bring on Jaycee Horn, who has proven potential when he's healthy. You're taking the risk that he doesn't stay healthy, and you're also taking that fifth-year option off the Carolina Panthers books, which they're going to be looking to rebuild their roster. So the more money for them, the better. So that's just a few names that are potentially on the trade market. Of course, there could be more popping up. And if you have your ideas, by all means, text me your ideas, insiders, and we will talk more about this as we near the trade deadline. But we've got to move on to week 7. Carolina Panthers. What did we see in the middle of the field against the Baltimore Ravens for this Washington Commanders defense that could be problematic? I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think it's going to be problematic in week 7. We'll take our look at this weekend's matchup coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we'll do that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can get a big return this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you're watching a game, could be a Commanders game, could be any game, and you get a hunch in the middle of that game. Maybe this team is down by 10, and you think they're going to rally back and they're going to end up winning that game. There are certain times in games where you can go in and actually make that bet in game that team is going to come back and either cover that spread or get that win. And also, when you go to FanDuel, you can check the live play-by-play. You can get the latest stat updates, and you can get so much more on the exact same page that you can then make that in-game wager. And if you're a new customer, you make that in-game wager a $5 bet, you'll get a $200 bonus bet guaranteed. For your first $5 bet, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. The Washington Commanders are 7.5-point favorites against Carolina Panthers. The over-under is 51.5 points. So take full advantage of this latest opportunity by going to FanDuel.com and downloading America's #1 sportsbook. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, we had a lot of questions for our film study this week that we're going to get to here now about the middle of the Washington Commanders defense. So obviously the Baltimore Ravens took advantage of that middle of the defense quite extensively. And the question is, are the Carolina Panthers going to be able to emulate what the Baltimore Ravens were able to do to take advantage of that? And the very easy answer is no, they're not going to be able to emulate it, because the biggest reason in my mind that all happened is because the Washington Commanders defense, especially that second level of the defense, the linebackers, were so tied to the line of scrimmage that it really restricted them from getting back into their zones, getting deep into the middle intermediate part of the field. The Baltimore Ravens, once they sniffed it out, they took advantage of it over and over again. 11 of Lamar Jackson's 20 completions came over the middle of the field or on routes that ran through the middle of that defense. The first 5 completions in the game did not exploit the middle. So this is something the Ravens basically in game said, okay, guys, this is available. We need to exploit it. The first pass over the middle came with 11:37 left in the second quarter. It was a 1st and 10 from the Baltimore 25, and it was a 23-yard completion to Rashad Bateman. The Washington Commanders were in cover 2 on that play, but none of the linebackers dropped deeper than the short zone corners, which typically you want your short zone corners the shortest. Your linebackers your linebackers are a little bit deeper in the middle, and then your safeties are deep, right? Bateman finds a 15-yard hole in the zone because the linebackers are tied to the line of scrimmage, and it's an easy completion for Lamar Jackson. The next one is also a 23-yard gain, this time to Zay Flowers, going up against cover 1. So you've got a single high safety, and you had man coverage underneath. The play action brought 8 defenders into the box within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage, and after getting an inside release on Benjamin St-Juste, Zay Flowers basically just ran away from him over the middle of the field. Later, there was a 25-yard completion in Nelson Aguilar, in which the Washington Commanders look to be in cover 3. The deep safety and the outside corners are each covering a third of the field while everybody else was in man. Noah Igbenogany lets Nelson Aguilar, the inside receiver, in a duo split to the right, run free while inexplicably covering the perimeter receiver that Mike Sanderson was actually responsible for, leaving Aguilar wide open. So that was more of a coverage bust on Noah Igbenogany, at least from the way that it looked on tape to me. For the most part, Baltimore reacted to Washington's man coverage looks really well. They dialed up man beaters all day, especially over the middle, and that's exactly what they were able to do. If I had to make one adjustment against the Ravens the next time they played, I would bring my safeties closer to the line of scrimmage and force Lamar Jackson to try to go over the top. He only took 2 shots over the top where the ball traveled more than 20 yards in the air, or traveled 20 air yards or more. One was complete, one was incomplete, so not enough data to really say that, it would have worked or would not have worked. But I can tell you that both of those passes that Lamar Jackson threw 20 air yards or longer were off target. They were short, and those are balls that can be intercepted quite often. So that's how I would have adjusted that. But there is no Lamar Jackson in Carolina. There is no Derrick Henry in Carolina. So these linebackers are not going to have to be tied to the line of scrimmage near as much as they did against Baltimore. So I don't know. I would not be too worried. I mean, again, I'm not going to tell you that Carolina is not going to get anything over the middle, right? They're still an NFL offense, but the rate at which it happened against the Baltimore Ravens, this is not something that the Carolina Panthers, the Chicago Bears, the Tennessee Titans, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Philadelphia Eagles coming up can emulate as well. And in fact, when you look at maybe the Eagles, right, Jalen Hurts is mobile enough, not Lamar Jackson mobile, but mobile enough, and they've got a decent, run game with Saquon and all that stuff. I think this is a good matchup for them to learn from when it comes time to face the Eagles. Looking at the Carolina Panthers specifically, 7th highest usage of 11 personnel this season so far. 75% of the time they're in 11 personnel, so you're going to see a lot of one back, one tight end sets. They use lots of play action. The 2nd highest usage rate of play action in the NFL, which means they are typically going to try to establish their run. So expect a lot of running early in this game. 4th highest usage of RPOs, which is interesting because Andy Dalton, not exactly the most mobile guy in the world, can move a little bit, but he's not incredibly mobile. So there's no threat of the quarterback run, but basically leaning on that veteran savvy to understand when to pull the ball, when to hand off the ball. So less of the quarterback running option. There's usually in today's modern RPO, you have the running back run, the quarterback pass. With the Carolina Panthers, basically it's the option of running back run and quarterback pass, which is kind of the original version of the RPO. Zone run game heavy in Carolina. Offense is 25th in total yards, 22nd in rush yards, 23rd in pass yards, 28th in first downs, 26th in third down percentage, and they're averaging just 17.2 points per game. So not good. On the defense, they use 3 down linemen more than half the time, but also have the 7th highest usage of 2 down linemen in the NFL. So you're going to see that as well. They tend to come out with light boxes, but they do use 7-man boxes, the 6th most of any NFL team. Usually they're in a 2 high safety look with zone coverage in the middle of the field closed over half the time. They rely on a 4-man rush, but they are top 5 in blitz rate this season. Defensively, they're 29th in total yards allowed. And again, the higher you are here, the worse it is. 30th in rush yards, 23rd in pass yards, 31st in sack rate, 29th in first downs, 30th in third downs, 31st in the red zone. They're allowing 33.8 points per game and have allowed no less than 22 points per game this season. They've allowed 34 or more points per game in each of the last 3 weeks to teams scoring less per game than the Washington Commanders, who entered last week the highest scoring offense per game in the NFL. They're now 3rd in the NFL. So the bottom line is there is a reason that the Washington Commanders are the highest favored team, have the biggest favored spread this weekend against Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers have not been very good. However, any given Sunday, it's obviously an NFL team over there, so they are getting paid to try to win games as well. And we will talk with Julian Council of Locked On Panthers on our next episode. It's crossover Thursday time. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is text them to me. Join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to become an insider today and get even more out of this program. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. In the morning, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks you off with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then in the afternoon, you go by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it is twice per day. I am Tony Wiggins' weekly guest on Wednesday afternoons. So if you tune in the day that this episode is dropping in the afternoon, you will find me talking with Tony Wiggins. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Every dayers, thanks for coming through every day like you do. And until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.